Why is a finishing move in wrestling even called a finisher when it doesn't actually finish the match anymore? In a standard event, one finisher isn't enough. Usually you need at least two. WrestleMania comes around, look, okay, now we need three. So what does that make it? A 50% finisher? A 1/3 finisher? That doesn't sound very intimidating, but I guess we keep the name anyway. And that raises the real question. At what point in history did wrestling decide that the most important move in a wrestler's arsenal should no longer be final? Because a finisher is supposed to be sacred. It's how you stand out. It's how people remember you. Would Stone Cold Steve Austin be as iconic if he beat Vince McMahon with a superplex? Would Randy Orton be as legendary if he won matches with the overdrive out of nowhere? Would The Undertaker have ended Shawn Michaels' legendary career with a Spanish fly? Hold up. That would actually kind of rule. Nah, Tombstone wins. But the point still stands. A finisher is not just a move. It is a cornerstone of a wrestler's identity. You protect it. You don't steal somebody else's. And even after retirement, you still always ask permission to use it. And even if you choose to, that's not always the right move, because when you hit a finishing move and get that 3 count, you want that crowd to be thinking about you, not Stone Cold Steve Austin. So when did this actually change? Because finishers didn't always work like this. For decades, finishers meant one thing. When you hit it, the referee was counting to 3. Hogan hits the leg drop, it's done. Brett locks in the sharpshooter, it's done. Stone Cold hits the stunner, it's done. The first real crack in the idea of finishers wasn't kickouts, it was protecting star power. As wrestling grew, went national, went global, the top babyfaces couldn't just win. They had to look invincible. Think about the Ultimate Warrior kicking out of consecutive elbow drops at WrestleMania 7. Making the villain look weaker became secondary, to making your meal ticket look like a superhero to all those children, aka the direct pipeline to their parents' wallet. And then the 90s happened, and with it we got the birth of the cool heel. Now the NWO did not just change wrestling, it made the bad guys the biggest stars in the business. Suddenly heels were not just obstacles, they were the draw. And you're not gonna make Hulk Hogan look weak to put somebody else over. That's not gonna work for him, brother. Now wrestling had a problem that it really had never dealt with before. We still had to protect the good guys. The kids still need heroes, a Sting, a Goldberg, that'll stand against your Hogans and your Nashes. But now we had to protect the villains too, because they had reached levels of popularity that were completely unprecedented. This was a boom period. Millions tuning into Nitro and Raw every week. 2 companies not just competing for ratings, but to create the biggest stars that the wrestling business had ever seen. We're talking Stone Cold Steve Austin, we're talking The Rock, we're talking Goldberg, Diamond Dallas Page, Triple H, Kane. Too much star power, and nobody could afford to look weak. So then we start seeing things that we had never seen before. Kane kicking out of multiple tombstone pile drivers at WrestleMania 14. A character who could logically take more punishment, but it starts to imprint that thought in a viewer's mind that the tombstone is not always finality. Suddenly The Rock is kicking out of stunners. Stone Cold is kicking out of rock bottoms. Goldberg is kicking out of the Hogan leg drop. Huge moments, huge matches, but also a small crack in the integrity of the moves themselves. And here's where it gets interesting. So let's play devil's advocate. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Does removing guaranteed finality make matches less predictable? Yes. Does less predictability increase excitement? Also yes. Do false finishes get people out of their seats? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, wrestling is a business of emotion. It's about telling a story, taking the audience on a ride and making them feel something, and sticking the landing, whether that's good triumphing or evil sneaking away on top. So the real question isn't, did finishers lose credibility? It's this: did that loss make wrestling worse, or did it make it better? Here's the reality. Those big match kickouts weren't the problem. The problem started when those kickouts stopped being big moments and they became expectations. Because all we did was replace one form of predictability with another. If you are in the upper mid-card or higher, chances are you're not losing to a single finisher. Not unless the heel cheats in a way that protects you as the babyface. Otherwise, that first finisher, you already know it's a 2.5. The second one could be the finish, but now the babyface has to get theirs back. Because if the heel now goes down to a single finisher, that makes them look weak. Now they have to survive one too. But unless it's a massive main event, that survival usually doesn't come from just a straight up kick out like the babyface did, because you can't be on their level, you gotta be right below it. It comes from something safer, like a last minute grab of the ropes, the manager pulling the referee out at the last second, a foot on the rope, a distraction, standard stuff. If this is a TV match, you already know what comes next. The next finisher is probably the finish. The heel won't hit it clean. They'll cheat to land it again. Or the babyface avoids the shortcut, hits their finish one more time, and wins. It's a formula, and if you've been watching wrestling for long enough, you start to understand the patterns. Which is the real irony. Finishers didn't die because they stopped ending matches. They died because they became beats. Predictable checkpoints that you have to hit before the match is allowed to end. And once finishers became predictable beats, instead of endings, wrestling only had one way to compensate, and that is escalation. If one finisher kickout does not feel special anymore, you don't remove it, you add another, then you start stacking them. Finishers back to back, signatures into finishers, finishers out of nowhere just to get a reaction, not to end a match. What used to be the most protected move in your repertoire slowly just became another step in an elongated combo. And this is where things really break, because now a finisher isn't the end of a story. It's a signal that the real ending is coming soon, and the crowd doesn't react with shock anymore. They react with anticipation. Not, that's it, but okay, we're close. And when every match is built this way, and not just the main events, the escalation never resets. Big match pacing leaks into TV matches. TV match pacing leaks into the mid-card, and suddenly everybody is working like it's WrestleMania, even when it's a random episode of Raw for a match that was barely promoted, which creates the biggest problem of all. If everyone's finisher takes 2 or 3 attempts to win, then nobody's finisher feels particularly stronger than anyone else's. The moves stop being a character trait, they start being a mechanic. And at what point does a wrestler say to themselves, hey, this isn't working, maybe I should try something else? And once a finisher stops defining who you are, it doesn't really mean anything at all. So how do you fix that? Because the answer isn't go back to the 80s, it also isn't banning kickouts. And it definitely is not trying to pretend that the audience doesn't know how wrestling works. The fix is actually very simple. Scarcity. One finisher kick out per card. That's it. Not per match, not per feud, per show. If you want somebody to survive a finisher, make it matter. Make it shocking again. Make the crowd remember who it was that did it. Everything else ends clean or dirty. One finisher, one pin, match over. Heel cheats into a finisher, match over. And if the match needs to go longer, you don't have to just stack finishers. Tell a story. Use fatigue. Use desperation. Use positioning. Win with counters. Win with roll-ups. Win with submissions. Make the finish feel earned, not escalated. Protect the move. Protect the wrestler. Let a finisher feel like a period again, not a comma. Because wrestling doesn't need bigger and bigger moments. It needs clearer ones. When a finisher actually finishes the match, the crowd doesn't just react, they believe it.